Welcome to another episode of Indigenous Insights, special topics, missing and murdered Indigenous women. It's been described as a national crisis in Canada, as an epidemic in America, missing and murdered Indigenous women. This program is designed to give a voice to the voiceless. Each episode features a different story. These are real stories about real people. Some of them are still missing. Many of these cases are unsolved or ongoing. Joining me, we also have Ariel Falls. Ariel, welcome back.
Thanks.
Ariel and I are both members of the Keweenaw Bay Indian community, a federally recognized tribe in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I work as a broadcaster at our tribal radio station here on the Res. Ariel works in Indigenous Victim Services, and she's the one bringing these stories to us, finding the facts, doing the research. She's even utilized the Freedom of Information Act to get a hold of police departments involved in some of our cases. So, Ariel, I'm curious, what's the hardest part about preparing these stories for us so far?
So far, the hardest part for me has been finding good information that goes in depth about these different people and the different cases, because it just seems like they aren't covered as much as other cases are.
And tell us a little bit about the process of utilizing the Freedom of Information Act. What was that like?
Well, the process for, I think, each county might vary, but for this particular county, I submitted that request online, and I just had to type in what I was looking for and the dates that I was looking for the particular case, and I submitted that, and within a business day I had a response asking for clarification.
Okay, so what was that response like? Were they weary of what you're looking for? Were they pretty cooperative, like, oh, here you go?
I don't think they seemed very weary. They just wanted clarification because I checked the other box thinking that they would just send me everything that they had related to it. But they don't really have a choice because it's under the law. They have to provide that public information.
Oh, I see. Okay, so let's get into this week's story. Who are we talking about?
This week we are talking about Sharon Baldeagle. And she was born on May 27th, 1972, and grew up in Eagle Butte, South Dakota, on the Cheyenne River Reservation. And presumably, she was Cheyenne River Sioux. Sharon was the oldest of 4 siblings and has been described as a daddy's girl who loved to dance, was enjoying learning how to cook, and she had just started her first year at Brainerd Indian School in Hot Springs, South Dakota, in 1984. Sharon ran away from her home in Eagle Butte on September 18th, 1984, and that's the last day that she was seen.
Okay, so 1984, she was starting what?
Her first year at Brainerd Indian School.
So is that a high school or a college?
I think it was a high school because she was 12, so it might have been like a middle school or high school.
Oh, 12 years old at the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is probably the youngest person we featured on the program so far, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so 12 years old, she was starting at this school, 1984. Her and her friend ran away?
Yeah, her and her older female friend ran away, and they were hitchhiking together in Casper, Wyoming, which is about 370 miles away from their homes. And I wasn't able to find information about exactly how they got to Casper, but I'm assuming they hitchhiked there and then continued to hitchhike once they got there.
Where were they trying to go?
I wasn't stated. They just kind of wanted to get away from home.
Why did they run away?
I wasn't able to find any information like that either, even in interviews with her father.
So it's just like they decided to take a trip?
Yeah.
Okay, so a 12-year-old girl, and how old was the older friend, do you know?
I saw a couple different ages, and one was 14 and one was 15, so 14 or 15, so just a couple years older. Okay,
so it's a couple of kids making their way across. What area were they in again?
They were in South Dakota, and they got as far as Casper, Wyoming.
Wow, okay. So how do we know that they got to Wyoming?
Well, in Casper, they were picked up by a man named Royal Russell Long, and he was a truck driver, and he took the two girls to his home in Evansville, Wyoming, which was just a few miles outside of Casper. He told Sharon and her friend that he wanted to get them some food and take them back to his house to clean up and eat. When they arrived at his house, he let them eat, but then offered them $100 to have sex with him.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it got bad quick there.
Yeah.
So how did that part of the story come out then?
Well, when Sharon's older friend told him no. He pointed a gun at the girls and tied them up with coat hangers and duct tape and sexually assaulted Sharon's friend. But while Long was sleeping, Sharon's friend was able to escape the house and run to a neighbor's house for help. So she was able to get away, and the neighbor helped her contact the police. And while they were waiting for the police, she heard Long's pickup truck drive away. And when the police showed up and searched his house, both Sharon and Long were nowhere to be found. So Sharon has not been seen since then.
Okay.
And she was last seen wearing a black and yellow top with a tiger stripe pattern, black shoes, and carrying a red bag.
And I'm guessing this guy hasn't been seen either.
Well, no, actually.
Well, wait. What's his name again?
Royal Russell Long.
Royal Russell Long. Okay, we're going to call him Royal Russell Long. Royal.
Okay.
That's his name?
Royal? His name's Royal, yeah.
Okay. So this guy disappeared with this girl, and, okay, tell us, people have seen him since?
Yes. Police were able to track him down and arrest him in Albuquerque, New Mexico, 750 miles south of where he was last seen from his house in Wyoming.
And about how long after the incident did that take place?
I read it from 3 days to 1 week, so not long at all.
Okay, so like the manhunt was still pretty rampant at that point. They were looking for him hard.
Yeah. And he was charged with and pled guilty to kidnapping Sharon and her friend for the purpose of committing indecent liberties with a minor and 1 count of aggravated assault. And he was sentenced to 2 life sentences for those crimes, and he died in prison in 1993.
Okay, died in 1993. So, how come he was never... What's his story about what happened to the little girl? And what was the little girl? The little girl's name was Sharon.
Yeah, Sharon. Well, up until his death, he maintained that he drove Sharon to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and found her a ride with a trucker who was heading to Dallas, Texas.
Okay, so
he claims that he didn't do anything to Sharon and had nothing to do with her disappearing other than finding her a different ride south.
So, and he... Don't tell me that's... The cops can't do anything because that's what that guy said.
They have tried to link him with Sharon's disappearance, and because authorities do think that he killed Sharon, but they weren't able to officially formally charge him with her death or anything like that before he died. They haven't done that afterwards either.
Well, they know he took off with her. How is that not linking it?
Well, he took off with her, but he says that he dropped her off with someone else.
But if he's being charged with kidnapping, I mean, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so that's all that they were able to get a conviction for was the kidnapping, which is good because it put him in prison until he died, but it still leaves all those questions about like where's Sharon, what happened to her.
Yep. So I mean, if somebody can go and kidnap somebody and murder them, and the way to get off a murder is just say, oh, I dropped her off with this guy, he took off.
Yeah, I guess so. And they weren't able to find any evidence, like physical evidence of that, of anything else that happened. So that's kind of where the case stopped.
It kind of seems like that some of these states' laws have to change because in many of these cases, the law enforcement is just held up because, I mean, how can you believe that guy? I mean, he did all the stuff that he did, and then we're just going to take him at his word that he dropped this girl off with a nice gentleman heading down to Dallas, Texas?
See, and I wasn't able to tell if the police actually believed him, like if there was some police that believed him and some that didn't, or like what was going on there. But it just seems like that if they didn't, then they should have looked more into it and looked for more evidence related to Sharon disappearing, because it just doesn't make sense.
Well, it doesn't take a detective to see that if they believe that guy's story, they're idiots. I mean, that guy kidnapped the girl. He's trying to make these propositions to them. I mean, he's a dirtball. So, like, why would they believe him at that point?
Right, but he is even a bigger dirtball than what he might seem like right now. Because in the late 80s, or no, Royal was charged in the disappearance of 2 other young girls in Oklahoma. And they were actually trying to charge him with the murder of those 2 girls, but he wasn't found guilty because they weren't able to find their bodies.
Okay, so what kind of evidence did they have in those cases where they were actually able to even charge him with these disappearances? How can they not charge him with the disappearance of Sharon?
Well, they did. They only charged him for the kidnapping of Sharon, but since they weren't able to find any physical evidence related to Sharon, other than kidnapping, but in the other cases, they had witnesses who saw the girls with the Royal, and then when they hunted him down after that disappearance, they found stuffed animals in his vehicle that belonged to the girls.
Okay, so they have to find some kind of physical evidence like that, linking them like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Or somebody's seeing them together. That just seems, It still seems just off. I mean, this guy did what he did, took off with the girl, makes the story up, and then he's off of it.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you wonder if maybe it just kind of wasn't a priority for them, because she was a native girl who ran away from home, and that was the story. So his story kind of fell in line with that, and everyone just kind of like, okay, well, we don't really care about that as much as we care about other things.
Or maybe they realized that he was going to get life with those other crimes, and they just figured that'd be the punishment he'd get.
Yeah.
Something like that. But still, that closure of knowing, where the remains are at, and then depending on different cultures and stuff, you want those remains, buried close to home sometimes, and there's different ceremonies and whatnot. I mean, they should have worked a little bit harder for that closure. I mean, I'm sure they might have interrogated the guy and tried to, get him to break and tell him where she is, because, I'm no detective, but I have no problem saying that I'm pretty sure that guy did it.
Yeah, I think so too. But actually, Sharon's father, his name is Taylor, he doesn't believe that Sharon is no longer alive. He thinks that Sharon is still alive. And in 2013, he did an interview with the Rapid City Journal, and he was 77 at the time, so he was getting pretty up there. And he said that he went to go visit Royal in prison before he died in 1993.
Oh wow, what a turn in the story here. So, what came from that interview?
Nothing, unfortunately. He said that Royal came to the window in the visitor's room, saw him, and walked away.
Oh man.
So he went there because he wanted some sort of inkling of what to hope for, to ask him which way she went, or anything that can give him some answers. Because for the 2 months after Sharon went missing, he spent that time driving around and hitching rides to search for Sharon himself. And he went as far south as Arizona trying to find her. Okay,
so why does he think that she's still alive then? Is it just kind of a blind hope?
That's what I was thinking when I first read it, and because it's easy for us to say, yeah, it seems like he would have killed her, but I guess if I was in a situation, maybe I would want some evidence of that.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean,
before I really accepted it.
Yeah, same time, he probably knew he screwed up too. He might have just said, all right, get out. And he left her out, and he made up the story about, even if he didn't kill her or whatever, he might have still made up the story about the dude going to Dallas and might have kicked her out somewhere.
Yeah, like it could have, there's a lot of other possibilities other than the one that seems obvious.
Yeah, it's hard to say, I guess. I mean, maybe you just dumped her out somewhere.
And when he was searching for Sharon in Wyoming, a truck driver asked him what his other children were doing without him, which is kind of sad that somebody would ask him that, but it really made him rethink what he was doing. So he went back home, and that's where he waited for answers about Sharon, and he's still waiting for answers. As far as my understanding, I believe that he is still alive, and he said that he will hold on to that hope that Sharon will come home until the day he dies.
Yeah, I mean, how can you not? If you don't have that, that's what closure is. If there's no closure, you're just left there to wonder. And hoping is better than wondering.
In the late 80s, there were 2 reported sightings of Sharon. That might be part of the reason that he still believes that she's out there.
The
One
late
was
80s?
in Wisconsin.
Do you say the late 80s?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just a few years after the incident.
Yeah, like I think 4 or 5 years after she disappeared.
All right.
So one was in Wisconsin and one was outside of Denver, Colorado, but they were never confirmed sightings. They were just reported.
And how are those reported? Just like somebody randomly called in or what?
Yeah, they called the police and said it might be the girl that's missing. In one situation, it was somebody thought that they saw Sharon in the passenger seat of a vehicle, that she looked like she was like dazed and out of it, and a woman was driving her.
Okay. And did the police find anything from that?
I'm assuming that they were followed up on, but they weren't able to confirm that it was Sharon or not.
How frustrating. I mean, these stories, Ariel, there's not going to ever be that point where we're like, yes, redemption or whatever. I mean, it's just either it's a bad ending or it's a terrible cliffhanger almost.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I can find some cases that I can cover that kind of give us that closure at the end and make us feel like the person responsible got what was coming for them, but it's very hard. It's very hard to find cases like that.
Yeah, and really, I think it's our responsibility to talk about these cases that are more open-ended because these are the ones that are kind of being set down because they're so difficult. I mean, I'm not sure if it takes laws being changed or whatever, but we're going to keep letting our voice be heard here with these stories. So her name was Sharon Baldeagle. Is there any other information that you're able to find?
Well, I'm kind of unrelated to the story itself, but a little bit of history of Sharon's family that I was able to find. I used it like genealogy websites and findagrave.com, and I don't know how I got into this part of the internet, to be honest, but from what I found, Sharon's uncle was Chief David Beautiful Baldeagle Sr., who was in the movie Dances with Wolves.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and David's grandfather, so Sharon's great-grandfather, was Chief White Bull, a relative of Sitting Bull, and he fought in the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876.
Oh, man. Man, that's crazy. Because, they have in Europe, they have, of course, the royal family, and they're on TV all the time and whatnot. There are those bloodlines across this continent still that sort of, I mean, it's not the same word, and of course, there's different words in different languages, but our own royalty here. So that's what you'd call a royal bloodline.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really think of it that way because, if our history would have went differently, Sharon could have been could have eventually been like a great leader in some of our communities.
Yeah, and I hate to say how, people of importance or whatever do get more attention, but if, those bloodlines were held up a little more the way they should be, that should have attracted more attention to her case even, almost.
Yeah, I agree.
At the same time, though, everybody's as important as everybody. But we know how it kind of works there. People of importance, they go missing, people notice a little quicker.
Yeah, and then you'd kind of think that with that family and those people, Chief David Beautiful Baldeagle and the rest of the family who were, they were leaders in their own communities, that they kind of tried to make it a little bit more known to people, but there was nothing that I could find that was from the family in that regard.
Yeah, and even though with all that, at the end of the day, it's those laws. I mean, the police seem to know who to go after, but it's those laws that are kind of stopping them. Or maybe they're keeping that guy safe because if he maybe he kicked her out or he'd let that guy take her to Dallas, Texas or whatever. I guess it's hard to say. That's something that you've researched also is people that are put in prison even though they're innocent because of, different cases and stuff.
Oh yeah, I've done a ton of research on that, and I think that's almost as bad as somebody not being put in prison.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really hard to say because in some of those stories where people are put in prison by mistake, a lot of the evidence does point right at them, and it does look like they could be the culprit, but, something turns out to prove that they're not.
Yeah, and it could be one little thing that somebody missed, so it's a complicated situation there.
So with all that research and stuff that you've done on both sides of the spectrum here with the MMIW and, the different innocent prisoners that have been sent to prison, do you think that this guy did it? Or do you kind of take his story? What kind of evidence would you need there?
Based on his history and his connection with other missing young girls, all of them were young girls that went missing, and they were usually abducted in pairs, like Sharon and her friend, where it kind of fits it's the same
pattern.
Same situation as the same pattern, and it's across the country, and it could have even went into Canada that these pairs of young girls were missing. And so while Royal was a truck driver, it all lines up. I think that he did it, and I think that the what's been made public and what I could find about it definitely lines up to be him.
Okay, so I mean, I guess with this one, at least we know that he was convicted of some of those crimes, and he did die incarcerated and whatnot. So it's a little bit of an ending on that one.
Yeah. And also, it is when I was researching this case, I was thinking about how it, like, when Sharon went missing, it kind of fits the requirements for an Amber Alert today. So if an Amber Alert would have existed back then, it could have been super beneficial for Sharon, and that kind of brings up how important they are today.
That is true, because if a 12 and a 15-year-old girl go missing, it goes out quick on cell phones. It goes quick out in social media these days. I mean, that's one of the pros, definitely, when it comes to technology and social media.
Yeah, because there is pretty strict requirements for an Amber Alert. They have to have a vehicle, like a description of the vehicle that's used in the abduction and a description of the person, I think. So, and that they had all of that at that time.
Jeez. So that's what I mean. That guy can be, a subject of an Amber Alert for this missing girl and whatnot. She disappeared, and then they'll still just take him at his word, like, oh no, I give her to this guy going down to Dallas.
Yeah, a lot of questions in that part of this story for sure.
I don't like it.
This is another part that related to Amber Alerts that I didn't really want to talk about, but I'm going to, because I feel that Amber Alerts are super important and super helpful. There was recently an Amber Alert in the area where I live, and it didn't have a good ending, but it did help police find the abductor. So after the alert, people were calling 911 to complain that the Amber Alert shouldn't be so loud, the Amber Alert shouldn't go out so late at night, and absolutely ridiculous things like that.
Yeah, that is just silly. What do they mean so loud? Like when you get a message on your phone?
Yeah, it's a super loud tone that your phone gives off.
That's just silly. I mean, it's an emergency.
Yeah, and I mean, I woke up to it, but I was able to go back to sleep, and sure, it's loud, and it did, made me jump out of bed, but that's the whole point of it. And it might have been like a little inconvenience to me or some other people, but it could have saved a child's life, and that, to me, that's completely worth losing a few minutes of sleep over.
Absolutely. And even, this time you said there was an unfortunate ending, but they were able to find the abductor, and they were able to get that closure that we've talked about, and that closure that we have not seen in some of these cases. So, I mean, it did its job this time. That could have been another missing and murdered woman.
Yeah, it could have ended just like Sharon's case, and we would have all the questions about it years from now. And so I just don't understand how people can have a different viewpoint on Amber Alerts.
Yeah. So the Amber Alert, that's across America and Canada?
I believe so. I don't know if they're like two separate things. Like if an Amber Alert goes out in Canada, if it goes out in like areas that are around it in America, I'm really not sure.
Well, I mean, I'm guessing it's like a regional type of thing, but I mean, it seems like it must be connected because they're both called Amber Alerts in America and Canada, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so that's something that is pretty cool, and plus what you were talking about last week for when missing women or women of high risk, they have to be put in that database thing.
Oh, yeah.
What was that called again?
There wasn't a name for it. It was called Project CARE through the Edmonton Police Department, or Edmonton RCMP.
That's right, the Project CARE. So Project CARE, the Amber Alerts technology, it is
the
helping.
database that you're thinking about, I think, is called NamUs.
Oh, NamUs. Yeah, that's the other one that you're mentioning. There's quite a bit out there that is battling, this epidemic that's out there.
Yeah, and I think that cases like this is a perfect reason or a perfect thing to look at and think, okay, yes, the police should be required to enter this information into these databases, and everybody should be required to not be able to turn Amber Alerts off on their phones and things like that, because it helps so much.
Yeah, and I think in the first couple of episodes I was a little bit hard on law enforcement, but now that we're getting further into these stories and into this series, I am more sympathetic, I think, to law enforcement, because it seems really, really hard to be able to go on anything. And even though you feel like you know where to go with it, and then, dealing with public, you have these tools that are very, very helpful, and then they complain that it's too loud and it upsets their beauty rest.
Yeah, and that would be super frustrating if I was a police officer too. And I know that I'm hard on police officers, but I have so much respect for the police and law enforcement, and I do recognize that a majority of police officers are good, and not there is a small amount that are bad that kind of ruin their reputation for them all. But I will also be one of the first people to criticize the good things that they do because I want things to be better.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of times too, the police force that we're talking about is from years past where, society was a little bit different and things were handled differently, and it's not right or wrong. It's just things were a lot different.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
And, that's, we're evolving as humans, I guess. All right. So is there anything else we need to cover on this one?
Well, if you have any information regarding the disappearance of Sharon Baldeagle, you can contact the Fall River County Sheriff's Office in South Dakota at 1-605-745-4444.
Okay, very good. Hey, tell them about Bernardin's fundraiser.
Oh, yeah. So Mitch and I have both kept open communication with Bernardine Bareheels, who is Brittney Tiger's mom. And we covered that case a couple weeks ago with Bernardine on the line with us. And it was announced that they are doing a raffle for a quilt that Bernardine's mom made. And it's a beautiful quilt, and it's embroidered with Justice for Brittney, and we've posted those pictures on our Facebook page and shared their post. So if you're interested in buying a raffle for this, tickets are $1 each, and the information for how to purchase them is either on our Facebook page or on the Justice for Brittney Facebook page. All of the funds that they raise through this raffle will be going towards the reward for anybody who comes forward with information that leads to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for Brittney's death.
So that's a way right there that you can show your support. And I know Bernardine was mentioning some of the organizations down there she works with, so they're doing some good stuff down there. They had that vigil a while back.
Yeah, and they have different chapters of missing and murdered Indigenous women places down there, and I think that's awesome.
She also, I think, was featured in another news segment after we interviewed her. So it's good to see that she's getting more coverage. She's doing a lot of work she should not have to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so you can find these episodes on Eagle Radio, keepitinthe.up.com. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter. Ariel, you have email set up specifically for these episodes. You can relay that information.
Indigenous Insights, MMIW at gmail.com. And that's checked pretty regularly, and I've been getting some comments and just positive messages from people, and I like reading them. So if you want to reach out, definitely do that.
Yeah, I encourage people to start reaching out even more, because I think that we have to start getting more of the listeners interacting with the show, because we are getting a lot of great comments on some of this stuff. And I think that we should bring some of these people in on the discussion, because, sometimes within the episode, we'll have questions ourselves, and those comments will answer some of our questions. So for Indigenous Insights, special topics, missing and murdered Indigenous women, we're going to be signing off here. Join us next time for the next episode. This is Mitch.
And this is Ariel.
We'll see you next time. Bamapi.